What's up, guys? Jared here. So I saw in my news feed that apparently the Chinese government has come up with their own ending for Fight Club. And so before watching it, I decided this would be perfect for a react video because in general, I find that censorship, although something that I very strongly disagree with, is actually something that's quite interesting because as somebody who's very preoccupied with discerning the ideological messages within movies, I feel like someone who works at a censorship bureau, such as the one in China, is very much doing a very similar kind of work, except they're discerning what messages are overall productive for their society or the society that they're trying to create and which ones are ultimately harmful. So in a sense, I feel like me and this censorship bureau individual, whether it be a man or a woman, are kind of kindred spirits in that we engage in a similar kind of work. So I'm kind of, in a perverse way, very fascinated by the line of work and the decisions that they make and how they ripple through society. So without further ado, let's take a look at the Chinese ending to Fight Club.
I want you to really listen to me. Okay. My eyes are open.
All right, it's the same so far.
What's that smell?
Okay, text on screen. I knew they wouldn't reshoot something, obviously. I mean, Brad Pitt doesn't look like that anymore. But anyway, through the clue provided by Tyler, the police rapidly figured out the whole plan and arrested all criminals, successfully preventing the bomb from exploding. After the trial, Tyler was sent to a lunatic asylum, receiving psychological treatment. He was discharged from the hospital in 2012. Is that it? Yeah, I guess that's it.
Where is my mind?
That's it. But they still have the Pixies playing. Interesting. Okay. So right off the bat, my initial reaction is they say that Tyler Durden was turned into the authorities. Yeah, but who are the authorities in this story? I mean, assuming that nothing else in the story has changed, the authorities are still very much part of Project Mayhem. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense. However, I will say, and I think this is, maybe a little bit controversial to be appreciating or complimenting the censor on his job, but I think probably the most brilliant thing about this is the notion, these last two sentences. After the trial, Tyler was sent to a lunatic asylum receiving psychological treatment. And the reason that struck me as probably a smart choice for the censor who's, trying to, I guess, subdue the revolutionary message of the film, even though, I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, but it's a smart move to recast the entire plot of the movie as a commentary of mental illness, to suggest, because I think that's really where you're able to neuter the message of this film most successfully. If you were to say that all of this was just in his head. I mean, as some people actually do interpret the film to mean, people who I guess kind of are less keen on the political philosophical messages of the film. But I think that by suggesting that all this amounts to is that Tyler has to go to a lunatic asylum. First of all, I also love I love, I know it's a little bit perverse for me to be so to be identifying so much with the censor, but in a sense, hey, I'm sure if you're watching this, you have a job. You probably want to do well at it, and you probably don't always agree with the means by which you have to do this job, but you want to be good at what you do. But anyway, the word lunatic asylum is also a term that you don't really hear very much in America because there's a little bit more sensitivity towards people with mental health issues. But no, they say lunatic asylum because Tyler Durden is insane, and everything up till this point in the movie is completely dismissed as some sort of mental aberration. And, rather than just saying that Tyler was sent to a prison or spent the rest of his life in prison, It's that not only was he sent to a mental institution to, again, not only say that he was punished for his deeds, but also that his deeds were deemed to be irrational, to be completely invalid. But the interesting thing is that he gets discharged from the hospital in 2012. I mean, I don't really know if there's any relevance to how long he stayed receiving psychological treatment. But I do find it interesting that not only was he so deeply mentally ill, but there's enough faith in the correctional system within China to suggest that he ultimately could get better, but only by giving himself over to the authorities. So I think that not only does the censor do a good job at neutering the movie of its political content by suggesting that it was all part of mental illness, but also reinforcing the power of the state by saying that, but ultimately he was healed by the system, by the correctional system. So I know that seems very devious, and it is devious. It's something that I don't agree with. But again, I go back to the idea that, hey, all of us do things at work that, the other thing about this, I mean, and maybe I'm giving too much credit to the censor or too much credit to the people who are consuming this movie. But in a way, isn't it like, I wonder if the censor could be, in a sense, shooting himself in the foot a little bit, because wouldn't this potentially further hurt the mission of the censor? And that's, of course, assuming that the rest of the movie goes untouched. I didn't find a full copy of the movie. I'm not going to do a reaction to the whole movie, so I just decided to do a reaction to the ending, which is what I heard was changed. But the reason I say that is because at the end of the movie, yes, buildings are destroyed, Project Mayhem wins, mayhem does occur. However, we also see that earlier in the movie. There's plenty of destruction that happens previously in the movie, and there's plenty of goals put forward by Project Mayhem that end in success. But if you're a viewer in China and you are charmed by Tyler Durden, like so many viewers are in America, in the West, and the rest of the world, and continue to be, and then you see that ending where, obviously it's been changed. I mean, whether you're from China or from anywhere, you understand that probably this was an altered ending. I mean, movies usually do not end so abruptly with text on the screen. Would it not only kind of enhance your revolutionary fervor, in the sense that if you're somebody who might be critical of China and you're watching the movie and getting like really riled up and really on board with the idea of kind of taking society into your own hands and raging against the forces of control. Now, granted, in the movie and in the book, it's much more of a consumer society thing, which I know that, like, I've been to China a couple times. I've studied Chinese. 我会说一点中文 for those of you who speak Chinese. But they much less emphasize consumer culture. So it's another interesting choice for them to be so adamant about undercutting a movie that is, again, railing against specifically consumer culture. But ultimately, my point is that if you're somebody who does feel a revolutionary fervor from watching this movie, which is exactly what the censor wants to avoid, the fact that it's been changed and that the government or the censor has so egregiously, not only put his mark on the movie, but also just like, completely ruined your movie-going experience, in the sense that, if you're really into the movie and all of a sudden, like, the rug is swept up from under you, all of that emotional catharsis that's built up in that concluding scene is all of a sudden just stopped midway, and all you get is just this ugly text, you're likely going to know that, oh, the reason why I've been robbed of this, catharsis from the end of the movie is because the government thinks that it's, I should not see how the movie actually ends. But again, maybe that's not how Chinese viewers engage with content. If there are any Chinese viewers watching this right now, I'd be interested to hear what you think in the comments. But anyway, more on just like the whole idea of censoring a movie that is specifically pretty critical of Western lifestyles is, I also understand that the Chinese government also, actually, I was in China in 2008 when The Dark Knight came out, and it was not shown anywhere because the character of the Joker was too anarchistic and too nihilistic, which makes sense because, China very much values control, conformity, and the Joker is this big symbol of anarchy, chaos, etc. Disobeying laws, the idea that rules themselves are arbitrarily imposed by a governing body that doesn't really have any real kind of existential authority above you. So it makes sense that the censor would do that. But in this movie, I think that there could have alternatively been a version of the ending that kind of really highlighted and emphasized the critique of specifically consumer capitalism, because ideologically, at least, China, at least ideologically among people who are not part of the Communist Party, it's still very much full with communist values and proposing communist values and stuff, or emphasizing communist values. So I found it interesting that they would choose this movie to be, assuming that the censor was thinking about more than just like, oh, well, we can't allow people to see a building blowing up because that's too violent, it's too anti-establishment, it's too anti-government, it's too anarchistic. But I think that there's a version of this that could have been equally interesting, in which they actually highlight and emphasize the consumer capitalism criticism, while they de-emphasize the thing that happens later in the movie, which is more how that railing against consumer capitalism kind of creates a more authoritarian version of the same criticisms that the movie was talking about, in the ways that consumer capitalism can kind of dehumanize us, can make us faceless, can make us numb. And then we see that happening in the second half of the movie, but with kind of a more patriarchal, evil version of it with Project Mayhem. So interesting work, Chinese censor. It's definitely given me a lot of food for thought. And overall, man, I wish they kind of like used some CGI or something to actually try and dramatize this new ending, but maybe they'll do that in a couple of years. Anyway, that's it for me. Just wanted to do this quick react video because Fight Club's a movie I know well. It's a book I know well. And again, censorship is something that, although I very strongly disagree with, I can't help but kind of morbidly appreciate the thought that very well may be put into these, pretty high stakes cultural decisions. So anyway, this is a bit of an experiment for me. If you like this kind of video, I'm sure there are other things that the Chinese government and other governments around the world have censored. And if you are interested in me trying to break down the reasons why they may have done that, I'd be more than happy to do so. But anyway, that's it for me today, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe. And as always, peace.